Hello and welcome to another exciting installment of the Green Thumb Lecture Series. My name is John Schaefer and I am with the Harris County Public Library. And today we have a very special treat for all of you out there, all of our gardening enthusiasts. We're thrilled to be joined by a distinguished member of the Harris County Master Gardeners Association who will share their expertise with us. Our lecture series takes place online on the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m., which of course is right now. And today's topic is fall's best vegetable garden. Timely discussion as we transition, hopefully sooner rather than later, into the cooler months and look forward to harvesting fresh homegrown produce. But before we dive into our presentation today, I'd like to go over a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, questions. Questions are absolutely welcome. We love engaging with our audience, so please feel free to type your questions into the chat on Facebook or YouTube. We have a Master Gardeners monitoring the chat and the comment section. They'll be answering questions throughout the presentation, so you'll definitely get your answer on before the end of the talk. And of course, we're also going to take a couple of breaks in the middle and at the end to speak with our presenter. And number two, mark your calendars. Our next show will be on August 20th. And we're going to be featuring the topic growing bulbs in Texas. So you don't want to miss that. But now, without further ado, let's turn our attention to today's topic, fall's best vegetable garden. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Teresa C. Teresa graduated from the Master Gardener program in 2005 and has since gained advanced training in various horticultural areas. She's an active volunteer, offering her expertise through presentations and workshops at community centers, libraries, sororities, churches, garden clubs, and other events. Teresa's wealth of knowledge and expertise make her a fantastic resource for anyone looking to improve their gardening skills. That's everybody out there today. Thank you so much for being here, Teresa. How are you doing?
Doing very good, John. You're very generous with your introduction. Thank you.
Well, we're very excited to have you. And I'll tell you what, after, this last week of Hurricane Beryl, it's so good that we have power. It's air conditioned. It's so nice to be using our electronic devices to see you and to get this presentation.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll tell you what, enough of that stuff. Let's get into it. I know we got a lot to cover. We will be pausing for questions. So once again, please type those questions in and we will get to them. We'll pause for them, but also they'll be getting answered along the way. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you so much, John. I'll go ahead and take it away. I thank you so much, John, for getting this all organized, and thank you, Master Gardeners, for answering all the questions. It's really appreciated. So let's go ahead and get going. We do these Green Thumb talks that John is talking about. We do a different topic every month. We do it once with HCC and once with the Harris County Library System, and they're all free talks. We just love free. So I also like to start and end with this slide. Hopefully, maybe someone can put these links into the chat area for people to just cut and paste. You can go to these websites and get any kind of horticulture information. You know, some people think of horticulture as just vegetables or just ornamentals, but turf is included in horticulture, insects, trees. There's just all kinds of free information in these links. So please go dive around there. So getting started with your vegetable gardening, you want to pick the right spot. So you want to pick a spot that's getting about 8 hours of sunlight. Now, some people say 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. That's probably fine in our area. I like to say 8 hours of good sunlight. You want to make sure that your soil has good internal and external drainage. So the external drainage, you can kind of guess if hopefully y'all can see my little mouse here. External drainage, if you're gardening in containers, you want to make sure that you have drain holes, either in the very bottom of the container or the side bottom. Our plant roots do not like to sit in water. They do not want to stay too wet. So we want to make sure that we have good drainage. Now that's the exterior drainage. The internal is the soil itself, the media itself. Maybe you have a combination of things that you're mixing. You want to make sure that whatever soil you have or media you have allows for drainage. In Harris County, we have clay soil. Hopefully we have listeners from outside of Harris County, but in Harris County, we have clay soil, and that just doesn't allow for good drainage. So you wouldn't want to scoop soil from your yard and put it into your raised beds or your containers because it doesn't allow for drainage. Now, an easy recipe to say, people ask what kind of soil or combination of soil should I use? An easy recipe is 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost. So maybe 2 bags of rose soil to 1 bag of compost, or some way combining that ratio. So that's an easy recipe to say. I like to play with other soils. I'll go to a nursery and I'll see a soil that I haven't used before and think, oh, that sounds pretty nourishing. So I might try a little bit of that as well. But that 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost will get you started. You also want to make sure that you're free of sunlight competition. So think about what is around the area that you're thinking about building your raised beds, or you're putting your big container gardening. Maybe you or a nearby neighbor has just planted a small tree that's going to get big. So consider that as well, especially on the south side of the growing area and the west side. The south and west is where you're going to get your best sunlight. So make sure that you're not going to have any sun blockage in the near or far future, perhaps. So you also want to make sure that it's easy to get water to your growing area. Now, drip irrigation it's the best way to go, but not everybody can set that up. Either you don't have the skills for it, or for some reason you just can't set that up. But soaker hoses are good. Hose end sprinklers are good. That's just a sprinkler that you attach to the end of your hose and let it go. So just make sure that it's easy to get water to your garden bed, because I know that if I have to move a hose around all kinds of patio furniture, the doghouse, other garden beds, I'm just going to kind of give up on getting that water out there, because as I get older, I get a little bit lazier. So you also want to make sure that you have good air circulation. Something that we don't have in something that we have in our yard that we don't see are microclimates. And the way to tell if you have these or where you have these is stand or sit in different areas of your yard. And you might notice that if you're in one area of the yard, the air just kind of seems stagnant. There's no movement on your skin. There's no air movement. Whereas if you're in other areas of your yard, you feel the slightest breeze on your skin. Doesn't have to be a real breeze. It can just be airflow on your skin, just a little bit to notice. And that's where you want to be putting your garden. If you have your garden plants, your vegetables, in an area with no air circulation, the plants are more prone to plant diseases and insect infestation. So also keep in mind, you want to be able to see that garden bed, those garden containers. The more you see it, the more you're going to think about it, which brings you out into your garden, even if it's just for a few minutes, to just check to make sure the soil's the right moisture, or look under leaves haphazardly to see if you have some naughty insects that are going in your garden. So catch those before it becomes a problem. So there's all kinds of garden designs that you might choose. Doesn't have to have structure. It can just be mounds of soil. The main thing is to have enough soil depth. So I like to recommend 8 to 10 inches of soil depth. And my reasoning is I love carrots. And I'm thinking, what's the biggest carrot I can grow? So is that soil going to accommodate that carrot and its roots? And also in the spring, I want to grow my tomatoes, and tomatoes are heavy feeders and they need a good root structure. So is there going to be enough soil to put out all those roots into that soil? So you want to make sure your garden bed is only as wide as what you can reach into without having to lean on that garden bed or step into that garden bed. As you step in or lean onto your garden bed, you compress or compact that soil. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a sec. So try to only have where you can reach in either from both sides, or if it's up against a structure, where you can reach in from one side. So you can be very creative with the kind of container that you grow in. Make sure that you have good soil. So if you've never had your soil tested before, I highly recommend it. I'm hoping one of my wonderful master gardeners can put the link to the soil test in the chat area so that people can just copy and paste. You may have already gotten ahead of me and done that. That's fine. You can put anything you want in that chat area whenever you want. So the soil test, when it comes back, and it comes back and they say 2 weeks, but I've never had one take that long before. So they'll tell you, you just let them know that you're doing vegetable gardening perhaps, and they'll let you know what kind of nutrients you might want to add to that garden bed to have even more success. So we're aiming for a pH that is slightly acidic. On that pH scale, it goes from 1 to 14. So 1 is very acidic, 14 is very alkaline, 7 is neutral. So 6.0 to 6.5 is what you're aiming for, and that's just slightly acidic. You want to be adding organic matter, so compost. Compost is organic matter. So I mentioned that starting recipe of 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost. But as the seasons go on, hopefully you'll be able to keep gardening every season. And I consider there's 2 seasons. There's basically your spring vegetable gardening season and your fall vegetable gardening season. There are some things that you can grow year round, but that's how we kind of speak, that it's spring season and fall season. So you want to try to add more organic matter or compost each season, or at least once a year. Now, we say that you're aiming for 50% pore space. That's a combination of air, water, and microorganisms. Earlier, I mentioned about not leaning on your garden or stepping on that garden because you compress or compact that soil. And that's what you're doing, is you're kind of squeezing out that air. And we don't really think about air being in our garden, but we need a little bit of air in there. We need those roots to be able to stretch out and reach to more nutrients in different areas. So if it's compressed or compacted, those little roots just can't reach out anymore. So that's something you're aiming for. Now the water, you want that soil to be moist, not dry, moist, not wet. That's what you're aiming for. Now with microorganisms, you put that compost and those fertilizers in it, you keep a good garden bed, microorganisms are going to come to your garden bed and they will work all that stuff that you put into your garden bed, and they'll break it down into a form that your plants can use. Keeping in mind, there's also earthworms, my favorite friends in the garden. Earthworms, they work their way through your garden and they eat the stuff and then they excrete the stuff. They call it frass. That's earthworm poop. It's called frass. And the plants just love that they excrete. So if you take good care of your garden, the microorganisms, the earthworms, and all help take care of your garden for you. So there's I put 3 fertilizers here. I'm not trying to advertise for any fertilizer, although I do use all 3 of these. I'm just trying to show you that we're aiming for a high nitrogen fertilizer for our vegetable gardening. So notice on each of these containers, there's 3 numbers. The first number on each container is higher than the other 2 numbers. So there's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Potassium is sometimes called potash. That's fine. So we're aiming for that nitrogen number to be, excuse me, to be somehow higher than the other 2 numbers. Now we want high nitrogen, but we don't want it too strong. So we don't want to use a lot of it. Just go by the instructions on the container. And if anything, I back off, like with this liquid fertilizer at the top left. So I can't remember the instructions, but say it says 2 tablespoons of their fertilizer to a gallon of water. That's the strongest I'm going to use it. I might back off. I might do a tablespoon and a half, or maybe just 1 tablespoon to a gallon of water. So if anything, you're using high nitrogen fertilizer, but just not too strong a fertilizer. Keep those plants happy and healthy. So compost when you can. Compost is such a good material. It's nutritious for your garden beds. Now, there is a difference between compost and mulch. Compost is organic material that has already broken down, and usually we're working this into the soil, whereas mulch is hopefully organic material that has not yet broken down, and we put it around our plants. So we put the plants in the ground, and then we put the mulch around it. Now, mulch does a lot of wonderful things for us. It helps hold in moisture, so that's what we think of the most. It also helps regulate the temperature of the soil, which helps regulate the temperature of the roots in that soil. So in the summer, when it's hot, it can regulate that temperature a little cooler, 3, 4, 5 degrees. And the reverse in the wintertime, it can help regulate that temperature a little bit warmer, 3, 4, 5 degrees. Mulch can help control weeds, insects, and one of my favorite things is it gradually breaks down and becomes compost. Then you work that into the soil, and the next season after you plant your plants, you reapply fresh mulch. So consider growing up. You know, we only have limited space usually in our city lots. So if you trellis up, then you'll get a little bit more space, and it makes some of the fruit, they call it the fruit, even though it's a vegetable, some of the fruit does better being off the ground. So I'm going to take a break here and see if there's any questions that we can approach.
Oh yeah, we got some questions, Teresa. Everybody's very active in the comments section. So let me go ahead. Valerie on Facebook wants to know about using rose soil for vegetables.
So yes, rose soil is very good. That's one of the recipes I recommend, 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost. Rose soil has a lot of things in it. It's got a little bit of sand in there. That's why the bag is so heavy, and that helps to kind of aerate things. It's got nutrients in it, and it's got the right texture in it too. So yes, rose soil and compost, I highly recommend. Good question, Valerie.
Great to know. Thank you, Valerie. Also, Ross wants to know, what is the recommended method of organically raising the pH in your raised bed?
So good question, Ross. So you can use some peat. Peat is it's got a lower, you want it to be a little bit more acidic. So the lower the number, the more acidic it is. So you can use some peat in there. Some people get a little bit carried away using too much peat, and it's holding too much water. So you don't want to do that, but that is one approach. Now, I've heard of people putting a little bit of sulfur in there because that's acidic also, but the same thing, you don't want to use too much. So gradually build up that acidity in there.
What about liming? I know liming is
yeah, I don't use a whole bunch of lime myself. Perhaps one of the other master gardeners can address lime in their in the chat.
Okay, yeah, we'll have them go through there. So yeah, okay. Absolutely, they're very active right now. So I have no doubt they will point that out. And then one question I want to know: so on the soil, how let's say you do a soil test and you get back the results and it's not great, but you know how to fix it, and you're able to, through some chemicals and maybe getting some of the methods you're talking about. How deep do you want to go? I mean, is it a gradual, like it has to be like really good soil for the top couple inches and then maybe gradually getting less and less worse? I mean, like, is there Is there a depth, an ideal depth of the soil?
Good, very good question. So I do recommend a soil depth of 8 to 10 inches, but as far as the nutritious part, if you can get that top 4 to 6 inches a little bit more nutritious, then you're got a head start there. Yeah, really good question. Work in some compost into that 4 to 6 inches, and that will get you going in the right direction. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll tell you what, everybody, keep the questions coming. We are having our master gardeners will work on those in the comment section. We'll also talk to Teresa again at the end of her presentation, but I'm going to let you get back to it. I know you've got some good stuff coming up here in just a couple of slides, I believe.
Okay, great. So yeah, for the cool season gardening, we're usually planting between September through February. And we have this wonderful planting chart. So again, I'm going to call on my fellow master gardeners, and hopefully you can put the link. Yeah, there it is. I see it there. So this, I just follow it like my little Bible. Even though I've gotten to garden for a long time, many years, I still refer to it and say, can I start the middle of this month, the end of this month? And you also want to watch the weather, because sometimes we're just not having a normal year. It might be warm a little bit longer, or maybe we get a cool come in a little bit earlier. So perhaps you can get a jump on cool season gardening. But this is the chart to go by. So I highly recommend it. Across the top, you have January through December, and down the left side, we have as many vegetables as we can fit in there in alphabetical order for you. So let's go ahead and start talking about some vegetables here. Let's start with the crucifer family. And I do love cabbage. So let's start with that. Now, we all wish we could grow cabbage this big, but I have been told by more than one source from Alaska in my talks that they had cabbage this big in Alaska. So I'm very jealous, but we do grow cabbage very easily here. We're usually planting in about October, perhaps the middle or late September, again, watching the weather and watching that chart. And we can be harvesting sometime between January and April, depending on the variety that you have. Now, something I find very interesting about cabbage is it is not just cold tolerant, but it has a defensive mechanism that it sends sugars into its leaves as that defensive mechanism to the cold. Now with cabbage, it has a tendency to hold those sugars. That's why cabbage, when you prepare your cabbage, you taste a little bit of sweetness to it. And it's not like eating an ice cream cone or a lollipop, but it's a little bit of a sweet touch to it. Now, there are other fall vegetables like kale and such that have that sweet, but like kale, it'll send those sugars up, but then it declines right after the frost. So you want to harvest things like kale right after the frost to get those sugars up in it. Cabbage has a tendency to hold those sugars. So I like to put a variety of cabbage here. I like to make things look different at the dinner table. So hopefully you can see my mouse, this bottom left, that is my hand in there. And I'm trying to show you how small this cabbage head is. Now that is early golden acre, where you can usually harvest in just a little bit over 2 months, whereas many of the other cabbage heads, it's 80 days, over 100 days, perhaps 105 days. So those are the bigger ones. Also, something to keep in mind, if there's only 1, 2, 3 of you in the house that you're cooking for, or the home that you're cooking for, you might not need a big head of cabbage. So you might have a big head of cabbage, you cut it in half, you use half of it, you put the other half in the refrigerator and hope to get to it before it starts declining. So if you can buy or grow smaller heads of cabbage, then you don't have to worry about using up the rest of the cabbage in the refrigerator. Consider getting this purple type, some people call it red, at the top left, just to change things up at the dinner table. And the bottom right, it has all this texture to it. This variety is Savoy, but there are a few other varieties. Different plant companies come out with different names for their various vegetables, but Savoy is the one that I usually try or recommend. So I'm not a nutritionist, but I do think about my health and my friends and my family's health. So I do research and figure out what kinds of nutrients are in the different vegetables that I eat. Now, there's all kinds of micronutrients that I don't even pay attention to because there's so many of them. And then hopefully all of your vegetables are offering you roughage, so it helps you digest your food. But I concentrate on the vitamins and minerals that there's a notable amount, and I try to keep records of that and compare, and that way I can balance my own diet by growing various kinds of vegetables. Now that was Brassica oleracea. This is Brassica rapa, and this is the Chinese cabbage. Yum. I love international foods and I really love Chinese food. So, I look at these and I just want to break for lunch and have some Chinese food. So, all kinds that do very well in our area. This is one of the Chinese cabbage heads that's cut in half, and oh, just yum. Absolutely gorgeous. So broccoli is an interesting vegetable in that, yes, it takes up a lot of space in your garden bed, and it takes a bit of time to grow it as well. But when you're harvesting the head of cabbage, just note where the smaller stems meet and become a bigger stem, and that's where you want to cut it off. Leave the rest of the plant behind in the soil, and it'll keep forming these side shoots at the bottom right for you. Now, those side shoots, you're never going to get, I don't know of any variety that'll give you a second head of broccoli, but they'll give you these side shoots and they're absolutely tasty just as well. Now, when you harvest them, leave that plant behind and you'll probably get more side shoots. So keep doing that until the plant no longer provides for you. And then you can pull that plant up and cut it up, hopefully put it in your compost pile, and have a little bit more space in your garden for something different. So also very good for you, another Brassica oleracea. Now cauliflower. Cauliflower usually takes up a lot of space for quite a long period of time. It's usually over 100 days, maybe 120 in some cases. When you think how dense a cauliflower head is, you can imagine that it takes a while to produce that. Now, when you have a white cauliflower head, you want to protect it. This one right here is a purple one. There's purple, yellow, chartreuse, and then the white that we all think of. When you have the white, you want to do something called blanching. So you can see all these leaves around the head. That white cauliflower, you want to help stay white, not getting burned by the sun and the cold, but especially the sun. So what you want to do is take the innermost leaves and pinch it off. Now, this is a wonderful photographer. He and his wife contribute to Texas Gardener magazine that I read from cover to cover every time it comes out. So you want to pinch this off. Now, they're using a clothespin here. I've used binder clips. Those are wonderful. They're going to rust out there, but they might last a season or two, maybe 3. Paper clips, anything you can think of to, carefully pinch it off. And you can start that process when it's about the size of your fist, maybe even a little smaller than that. And that'll keep it white. So this was in my garden bed. Now, across, that's actually 8 feet. So it's a little bit of a, doesn't quite show. Makes it look like it's taken up the whole 8 feet. It took up probably about 6 feet, just to let you know how much space you need. This is Violet Queen here, and this is Graffiti, this purple one here. This is the same photographer. So usually when you have the purple that you grow, when you cook it, it becomes the chartreuse color, like the 2 front ones and the Veronica in the back with all the texture. So, if you want to show off to your friends, have a dip and serve it raw, cut it up in pieces and serve it raw. And you can just say, oh yeah, I grew those. Yeah. The different colors. And this one here, one of the names for it is cheddar. There's other varieties, but cheddar is a common name. So moving on to collards, kale, and kohlrabi. So with collards and kale, you can either direct seed or transplant. And the definition of that, direct seed means you're putting the seed into the growing area, the spot that you're going to be growing it. Transplant means you're either growing it inside and you're going to transplant it to the growing area, or you buy it from a nursery and you're going to transplant it to that growing area. So with collards and kale, you can do both. With kohlrabi, I like to direct seed. And I'll show you that. You can kind of see the taproot here, and that's why. So anything that you're eating the root, or it just has a, one strong taproot, I like to direct seed those kind of plants. So you can, with the kohlrabi, those grow kind of upwards more. Those you can plant 6 to 8 inches apart. With the collards and kale, I would recommend at least 12 to 15 inches apart. Know the variety that you're getting. And if you can look up online to see how big they're allowed to get, sometimes you might want to leave 18 inches between plants. So collards are just an elegant looking plant, I think. But any of your fall vegetables that grow in this mosaic form, you can just cut off outer leaves of what you need for the meal you're preparing. So say there's only one of you or maybe two of you, maybe you only want 2 or 4 leaves. So just cut those from the outer part of the plant and let the inner part keep growing those new tender leaves inside. Now, if you're like me and you love collards and you have room to plant several plants, then each time you're going to have some, you can cut 1 or 2 leaves, or maybe 3 leaves from one, 1 to 3 from another, until you have as much as you need for that meal. So also very good for you, another Brassica oleracea. The subvariety is Acephala. Most people don't care about scientific names. I find it interesting myself. So of the kale, this is the winter boar kale. Isn't that just lovely? Look at all the frilly leaves it has. So the brighter leaves right here in the middle of this plant, that's the new tender leaves coming out. So you want to harvest from the outside only what you need for the meal you're preparing, and let those wonderful tender new leaves keep coming for you. So this is the red boar. I love the flavor just as much as the winter boar and many of the other kales, but I really love this plant because it's so pretty. In the wintertime, you don't have flowers blooming. So it's kind of nice to have a splash of color out in the garden. And when this plant starts growing and that cold hits it, it starts turning this purple with the leaves, and then the mid veins are pink. So it's also pretty, and it just happens to taste just as good as the other kales. Now this is Hanover salad. It has a milder flavor for a kale, and it grows in a little bit different manner. So you just get your hands in there and cut off what you need. And Toscano's been growing in our area for a long time. And, with any of these that you're harvesting from the outside, say you have to be away for a while. Maybe your daughter has a baby and you want to go and help her for a couple of weeks, or you're called away for a while for some reason, and you come back and those outer leaves have gotten a little bit tough. All you have to do is cut the leaf, bring it inside, rinse it, gently pat dry it, and run a knife down both sides of that mid leaf, or mid vein. And that's the tougher part. And the rest of it's going to be delicious. So you can either cook that mid vein or cut it up and put it on your compost pile. So kale, absolutely delicious. It got its comeuppance, is the way I like to say it. People realize all the nutritional value that it has, and so they were making smoothies out of it, and kind of like potato chips, they make kale chips out of it. You can do so much with kale. Just be a little bit creative. So that kohlrabi that I've mentioned, so the whole thing is edible. Now, if you look real close by David's right hand, this is David Parrish, you can see the root coming through, but the whole ball is edible. Now, some people remove the outer part, but the whole ball is edible. These stems are edible. You can cut them up in like 3 to 5 inch pieces and use them for dips. The leaves are wonderful. My go-to, I like to say, soups, stews, stir fries. You can, if you don't have enough leaves for a side dish, then you can add it to something else. So you can see the purple one, it's called early purple Vienna, and the white one over here happens to be Cossack. There is an early white Vienna as well, but this is actually its root down here of the purple, and then this is the basal plate. So that's where the vegetable connects to the root. So I would cut all that off, and the rest is edible. Now, I don't like to badmouth a vegetable, but I will give us a small warning on this. Notice it's very high in vitamin K. Well, vitamin K helps with blood clotting. So if you're, some people have a tendency to bleed a little bit more, so this would help. As we get older, sometimes we need blood thinners. So this actually works against those blood thinners. But in, normal living, it's very good. So turnips, don't forget to eat the turnip greens, but let's talk mostly about the bulb under the root, under the soil. So you can plant, so there's 4 root crops that I keep together. So beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. Beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. So all 4 of them are root crops. All 4 of them you want to direct seed, so you don't want to transplant. And all 4 of them, I highly recommend you harvest slightly immature. So just check to see when it should be harvested. In the case with the purple top white globe, which I'll show you another picture here that explains why it's called that. With that one, it's about 52 days to harvest. So I'm going to be looking in the 40s of days and probably harvest then. Now, you can do succession planting or weekly row planting with all 4 of these: beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. So with that, say you want 7 turnips every week. So you go out there, say Monday morning, and plant for 7 plants. Tag it and date it. The next Monday, scoot down about 5 or 6 inches, or maybe you're scooting up, depending on what direction you're going in your garden, and plant for 7 more turnips, and then tag it and date it, and keep doing that until you reach that 7th week. And so you're into your 40 of days, so 42, 49 days. That's about when you should be looking to harvest. So what you want to do is check that first planting that you planted the first week. If it's ready, just kind of poke your finger around the root. If it's ready to be harvested, harvest it, tussle the soil a little bit, maybe drop in a little bit of fertilizer and tussle the soil a little bit more, and then replant that row. And then the next week you should be able to harvest the second row. So it's, succession planting or weekly row planting. And you can do that with all 4 of those: beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. So you can see why it's called purple top white globe. Very good for you, very tasty. My aunt used to love, olive oil, a little bit. She had to have that brown sugar and a little bit of butter or margarine. Ooh, she was in heaven when I made that for her. So moving on to mustard, another brassica. I pronounce it Juncia. I have heard it pronounced other ways. Delicious, grows very good in our area. It adds a little bit of bite to your salad, or maybe you like the whole side dish to be, a little bit, hate to use the word sharp, but it kind of wakes you up. It's a wonderful flavor. I usually add a little bit of butter or margarine and olive oil. Some people might want to sweeten it up, but I don't usually put any sweet in it. So all different varieties that do very good in our area, very well in our area. So moving on to radish and daikon. So hopefully you've had one or the other or both. The top picture is the cherry bell. You probably see that in the grocery store. Now that's one of the 4 root crops of the beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. Now the cherry bell, it's small. It's smaller, and you can usually harvest it in about 21 days. That's 3 weeks. So if you do succession planting or weekly row planting, you can start harvesting quicker. So it's a fun thing to plant, and it's very good to cut it up and put it into your salads. So the daikon, oh, and there's all different kinds of radish that do really good. Raphanus sativus is the scientific name. So something I find very interesting about the radish is when I think of antioxidants, I think of berries. But here we are with a vegetable that's offering you, high in antioxidants. Now the daikon, it's an Asian radish. I hadn't even heard of this until I was wandering through the Master Gardener vegetable garden many years ago, 15, 18 years ago. And they were harvesting some daikon. And David and some of the other people out in the garden were telling me a little bit about it. So of course I had to come home and grow some myself, and go to my local H Mart and I buy some if I can't be growing it, if it's the wrong season. And I found that you can cook it. I don't eat it raw. I guess you probably could eat it raw, but when I cook it, I either go savory or sweet. So it's good both. And don't forget to eat the tops. So the tops are edible too. So this is Raphanus sativus. The variety or subvariety is Longipinatus. And there are all kinds of daikon that grow good in our area. Moving on to lettuce. I just learned the sign language. This is lettuce. Go figure. So with lettuce, I'm not even thinking about planting lettuce until late October, early November. You want the soil to be cool. If the soil's warm, or if it warms up outside, that lettuce gets confused and it thinks it's time to what they call bolt, and it wants to put on seeds. So you want to allow the season to come in, the fall season to come in before you start planting your lettuce. Now, when you plant your lettuce, you can either do it from transplant or direct seed, either one. If you're direct seeding, you want to just make the seed make contact with the soil and gently water in, because this seed needs light to germinate. So you don't want to cover it up with soil. Just have it make contact with that soil and gently water it in. Now, something that we find in our lettuce gardens is if you're a grazer like I am, I love to graze in fall vegetable gardening, go peel off a leaf of cabbage and lettuce and arugula and cilantro, and then roll it up like my vegetable tortilla and eat that while I'm walking around in my garden. So if you do that with lettuce, you might have noticed a little bit of a bitter bite to the lettuce. It's the liquid inside, that white sap, that latex inside of it. That's what's a little bit bitter. So what you can do to alleviate that is, say you want salad this evening, harvest this morning just what you need for that meal, bring it inside, gently rinse it off, gently pat dry it. And if you have one of those produce bags, that real thin, clear plastic produce bag, put it in the refrigerator 6 to 8 hours, and that should take care of all that bitterness. So easy, isn't it? So all kinds of lettuce that does very good in our area, different colors, different textures. Go for the leafy type lettuce. So there's Bibb, B-I-B-B, and Cos, C-O-S. Any of the leafy type lettuce does good in our area. Now that iceberg lettuce that we see at the grocery store, it's just not going to do well in our warmer climates. So you'll have lots of luck, and there's so many kinds of lettuce that you can pick from. So there's some speckled ones. We used to buy this as freckles, and then another seed catalog came out with speckles. So have fun with it. Now, the umbel family, I'm just going to talk about the carrots. And with carrots, it's one of those 4 root crops of beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. So you can do succession planting. So you want to direct seed and harvest slightly immature. Now, most of your carrots are going to be at least 60 days to harvest. So keep that in mind when you're planting and how much space you put out there. If you're doing succession or weekly row planting, perhaps instead of every week, maybe you do every other week. And they take up a little bit less space widthwise. So your turnips, your turnips get 3 to 4 inches wide. So you want to plant those far enough apart, center to center, when you put your seeds in, to where each turnip will have enough space to grow and not fight for nutrition. Now, carrots, they're not as big around, so you can plant them a little closer, 3 to 4 inches apart instead. So Daucus carota is the scientific name. I love this Touchon. I love them all, but I love this orange rocket. Yum. So, okay, so garlic is the last thing I'm going to talk about, and I get long-winded talking about garlic. So, good for blood pressure. Allium sativa is the scientific name. So with garlic, so if you cook, you know the difference between a clove of garlic and a head of garlic. One of my favorite sayings that I guess I kind of made up is never be ashamed of what you don't know yet. So that is why we talk to each other. We listen to, people talk about something they know something about. So you're planting cloves when you plant. Now, say you are having some friends over and you're going to be cooking, and the recipe calls for 3 cloves of garlic, and you go to your kitchen counter and oops, you're out of garlic, but you have some garlic growing in your garden. So you can go out there and cut off 1 leaf from one garlic plant, 1 leaf from another garlic plant, 1 leaf from another garlic plant. So you really only want to cut off 1 leaf per plant, and only as much as you need to create that garlic flavor, because you need photosynthesis. If you cut off too many leaves, you don't get that sunlight hitting the leaves to create that carbon and, go full circle to feed that plant. So there's a lot of flavor and nutrition in the leaves as well as the garlic head. So this is the garlic head. So it has had, when you buy these in the store or at your feed store, it's going to have these thin layers of, I think of rice paper. It's very thin layers of skin on it. So this is with that skin pulled off. So this whole thing is a head. This is a clove. This is a clove. Each segment is a clove. So when you're going to plant these in your garden, one, keep in mind, in our area, we only grow softneck. There's softneck and hardneck. The hardneck does not do well in our warm climates. So we're tempted to buy garlic at the grocery store, but you don't really know if that's hardneck or softneck. So I just go to my feed store, I call it my feed store. Wabash is my feed store, but you want to go to the one closest to you. And I just start calling them in September and, do you have your garlic in? Do you have your onions in? And when they start getting things in, I know it's safe for me to start planting. And your feed stores only carry what grows in that area. So if you're listening to me from, say, Montgomery County or maybe north of that, your feed store might carry something different than my feed store carries. So keep that in mind. So when you're planting these, I leave that skin on, see that top right, I leave that skin on until I actually get into my garden, and then I peel off that skin, and I'll peel off 1 clove and put that, you want to put that in 1.5 to 2 inches under the soil level. So you're putting it really deep in there, 1.5 to 2 inches under. And, with seeds, it doesn't matter which way the seed is facing, but with the clove of garlic, you do want, so if, hopefully y'all can see my mouse. So this head of garlic right here, you can see this is the top, this is where the roots were, there's that basal plate. When you put that garlic clove in, you do want it to be facing with the pointy end up and what was the root end down. So that's the last I have. Are there any questions you might have?
Absolutely. We've got some great questions coming in. Hang on just 1 sec. So let's start off. Ross on Facebook wanted to know, would you recommend some nightshades for the fall season? And if so, which ones?
Okay, so not in the nightshade family, there's tomato. I think tomatillo is in there, but anyhow, tomatoes, peppers, um, potatoes, and what am I leaving out here? But those three. So a lot of people do fall tomatoes. Now you want to start planting those. Most people are planting those August. And what they do, because it's so hot in August, some people will actually string up some tarp on the sunny side, kind of away from where your plants are. So it's getting a lot of indirect light, but it's not getting that deep penetrating sunlight. And peppers. I think I left out peppers a while ago. Peppers, yeah. Quite often, your
Eggplant, I
peppers.
believe eggplant was suggested in the comments.
Eggplant is in the
Thank you,
nightshade
Jennifer.
family. Thank you. I knew I was leaving some little buddy out there. Thank you. We got some smart people around. So I've never grown eggplant in the fall, but I have had some eggplant last through the fall. So yeah, that would probably be good. But as far as production, you will get you probably get tomatoes, and I recommend the smaller ones. When you grow the bigger ones, because there's so many days to harvest, you're kind of playing with fire.
Right.
It's real hot and then it might get real cold. So I recommend something smaller for fall tomatoes and for peppers. You'll probably get good production with those two especially. Great question, Ross.
Great. Also, Kirsten, also on Facebook, wants to know what are the benefits of harvesting early?
Good question, Kirsten. So in particular, those 4 root crops. So I'm glad you asked because I didn't mention that. So if your root crops, if you leave them in too long, they can start splitting and in the soil, and that will attract all kinds of insects to feed on it. They can also start getting bitter and they can start getting hard. So only with those 4 root crops do I recommend harvesting slightly early, slightly immature. Great question, Kirsten.
I have a question. You'd mentioned at one point there about talking about soil temperature and in regards to like when to plant. How do you? Is it just kind of is there a soil thermometer? Is there,
So, the best thing is to go by that chart that we had, that
okay.
planting chart. Now, I recommend if you're experienced in gardening, it's a little bit easier to go by the chart and watch the weather. Some people are just very good at paying attention to the weather. My husband's from a farming family, so it's second nature to them. But for me, I really have to put a little extra effort. So if I know that fall is coming, but yet here comes a warm front, then I know to hold off on those lettuce seeds that I was going to put in, or maybe another crop that I was thinking about putting in. Otherwise, just fall back on that planting chart, and it helps tremendously. Yeah, Skip and a whole crew, I guess, redid that planting chart. I think it was 2019, if I remember right.
Okay.
And so it's updated again for us. Yeah,
And that's
good
obviously
question.
we've got links to that in the comments section, so please look for that
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And speaking of weather, we just come out, Hurricane Beryl just came through. Obviously, when you're planting, it can be excessive rain, excessive wind, and you can prep in some ways any just general rules of thumb on vegetable gardens. And if we happen to get some more extreme weather in the future.
Yeah, so good point to make. Now, in the case of a hurricane, as we can all guess, it's just kind of hard to fight it. But with other plants and semi-normal gardening, you can put tomato cages around your vegetables, or other cages or trellises or some kind of protection, and then you can put floating row cover around that, and that'll stop some of the wind. Now, there's also something called frost cloth, and that'll stop more wind. So floating row cover is very thin, and that frost cloth actually helps protect from some extreme temperatures and a little bit more of the wind. So
Okay.
those are possibilities.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, okay. I think that about wraps us up with questions. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? Anything coming up with the Master Gardeners? Or I know obviously we've put the links in there. There's a survey in the that I put in the comment section. If people are able to fill that out, we would love that. Let's see. Also, we have, of course, your fertilizer. You pointed that out. We'll have to let people. Those some good brands.
So we do have some plant sales coming up, and you can go onto our website and look under events and find out when those will be. They even have the schedule for next year that you can look up as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much. A couple more things before. I'd like to remind everybody about our next show, which will be on August 20th at 11 a.m. We'll be discussing growing bulbs in Texas, a must watch for anyone who is looking to enhance their garden with beautiful and resilient bulb plants. So mark your calendars and join us for that. And if you enjoyed today's show, please tell a friend, or of course, like and share our video to help us spread the word. We do appreciate anything you can do for us. Thank you again for watching, and thank you so much, Teresa. It was wonderful. It was amazing. And I would say to everybody else, happy gardening.
Thank you, John. Thanks for John, the Master Gardeners, and everyone that came to join us today. Thank you so much for attending.
I'm so glad you said that. I forgot to mention all the people helping behind the scenes: Robin, Martin, Janice, Joanne, and of course, Celeste helping out.
Chevy.
Chevy. I don't know if she was in the back, but she might.
Oh, okay.
We always thank her anyway. So anyway, thank you everybody, and happy gardening.
Thank you.